Hey guys, what's going on? It's a bit of a long one today, and it's gotta be because there's a lot of information in this, and we're gonna go through this press conference piece by piece, and we're gonna unpack it a little bit, so let's get into it.
The seeds for the shameful destruction we saw last night were sown in the 5700 block of South Racine Avenue. On Sunday afternoon, officers responded to a call of a man with a gun. A suspect was spotted, and officers attempted to interview the individual who quickly fled. As this person was running away, a gun held by this person was pointed at our police officers who gave chase, and this person fired shots at our officers. Officers returned fire and struck the individual, who was taken to the University of Chicago Hospital and is expected to survive. The shooter is a 20-year-old man with 4 previous arrests for charges including burglary, child endangerment, and domestic battery. I am relieved to say that none of our officers were hurt in this shooting. A gun was recovered from the scene. After this shooting, a crowd gathered on the south side following the police action. Tempers flared, fueled by misinformation as the afternoon turned into evening.
So let's talk about it. There was a call to the police of somebody with a gun. They responded to the call. As they questioned the guy, he ran away from them. As he ran, he turned and fired shots at the police. The police shot back at him, injuring him. He was taken to the hospital and he's expected to survive. While the police are trying to process this scene, the crowd starts to grow, and there's anger and dissent against the police for being there processing the scene.
CPD became aware of several social media posts encouraging looting downtown. Officers were dispatched to our downtown area once we got word of the social media posts. 400 officers were dispatched to our downtown. As the officers arrived to our downtown, the first incident happened at a store near the 87th and the Dan Ryan Expressway. Soon, car caravans were headed into the loop. This was not an organized protest. Rather, this was an incident of pure criminality. This was an act of violence against our police officers and against our city.
It was a riot. Call it what it was. It was a riot. And it was a riot at the end of May. And I'm going to show you guys footage from the end of May because they really want to say that this is different than the end of May. But that was a riot too.
As of now, Chicago police have made more than 100 arrests for looting, disorderly conduct, battery against police, among other charges. A total of 13 officers have been injured throughout the night, including a sergeant who was struck with a bottle. Another officer had his nose broken as he fought with a group of looters.
So they had 100 arrests. I wonder how many arrests they had back in May.
So we had to take swift action so that the violence and property damage wouldn't escalate. If you've seen across the country, we arrested a little over 100 people, about 108 people on last night. There was some property damage. It was minimal. There were some squad cars, about a dozen, that were damaged throughout the city, not just in the downtown area, and there were some officers injured. One had a broken wrist as a result of the crowd coming toward them and attacking our officers.
Well, that's strange.
The last 7 days, a total of 9 officers have been shot at in Chicago. What we are seeing is violence against police. A security guard and a civilian were struck by gunfire during the melee last night in our downtown. They were both taken to Northwestern Hospital in critical condition. 5 guns were recovered during these incidents. In fact, CPD has recovered a total of 149 guns this weekend. Another 164 guns were handed in as part of a gun turn-in event on the west side. Gun arrests in this city are up 15% this year compared to 2019. In one incident last night, officers were arresting a looting suspect at Michigan Avenue and Lake Street. This person was carrying a cash register he had looted out of a store. As officers were making the arrest, another vehicle passed by the officers and fired shots at the officers.
The police stop a guy running down the street with a cash register, and while they're trying to arrest that man, somebody in another vehicle does a drive-by on the cops shooting at them. And people ask me why I call my channel Circuses.
As their vehicle turned the corner, resulting in an exchange of gunfire between our officers and these suspects. A bullet was found lodged in the cage of the police vehicle. So far this year, Chicago police have recovered 6,189 guns. Each of these guns recoveries, as you can imagine, has the potential to turn into a deadly force encounter with police. As for the weekend figures, officers made an outstanding arrest for murder, 8 outstanding arrests for criminal sexual assault, and 2 outstanding warrant arrests for robbery, and 5 arrests for aggravated battery.
And that just shows you the type of people involved in this. All those arrests, from the murder, everything that has outstanding before it, that's just where the police were running warrants on people that they caught. There were 5 actual battery charges. The rest of it was all just outstanding warrants.
Friday through Sunday, 6 p.m. to 11:59, there were 31 shootings throughout the city, 3 of which were murders. These shooting incidents and the looting we saw overnight are completely unacceptable. Criminals took to the streets with confidence that there would be no consequences for their actions. Let me say that again. Criminals took to the street with the confidence that there would be no consequences for their actions. And I, for one, refuse to allow these cowardly acts to hold our city hostage. CPD will not stand by as our beautiful downtown becomes someplace that people fear. I have instructed our detective units to create a special team of investigators to look at the hours of pod camera footage from last night. We have high-definition video of suspects and vehicles. If others have security video, would you please forward them to cpdtip.com. I pledge to pursue these offenders to the fullest extent of the law. A heavy police presence will continue throughout the downtown area today and until further notice. Officers will return to working 12-hour shifts, and all days off have been canceled until further notice. We are also working with other city agencies, including Streets and Sanitations, the CTA, the Department of Transportation, and the state police, and other agencies, in a multi-layered plan which will be based on lessons we've learned from earlier this summer.
So he's forming a group where all of the government agencies are going to get together and snitch on people, and this is where the false dialectic comes in. This is where the problem, reaction, solution comes in. Here's the police saying that they're collecting people's social media information, pouring through surveillance videos, locking down the city of Chicago completely, and the majority of people haven't even done anything. They haven't even gone outside yet. And yet everybody is very happy to have these new measures implemented. But does it bother anybody that the Marxist groups that were causing these problems to begin with want the tighter lockdowns?
Downtown access will be restricted from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. The department also has its eyes in the neighborhoods to ensure that looting does not spread based on our lessons learned. Officers will be deployed in a large measure to our neighborhoods.
So now they're going to shift their large police presence into the neighborhoods because they learned that those are the next places to get looted the last time.
To protect the neighborhoods. This is a beautiful city, and Chicago police officers will not allow this selfish criminal act to destroy what generations of hard work have built. I would now like to call the mayor, Mayor Lightfoot, to the podium. Mayor.
And we're going to get to the mayor, don't you worry about that. But what I want to talk about first is the questions that came from the press. Because in the questions from the press, I think we find how curious this whole situation is.
So one of the things that I emphasize in my comments is where we start this with the shooting in the 7th District in Inglewood, the Inglewood neighborhood. And from that police-involved shooting of the 20-year-old who shot at the officers first, a crowd began to grow and become very intense interaction between the police on the scene as we processed the crime scene and the officers there to make sure the crowd stayed out of the crime scene. So that grew and grew into the late night hours on yesterday. And then almost immediately as that crowd dissipates and wanes in its size, we are monitoring social media in our CPIC division, and
So what is CPIC? Well, it's a information hub, a data center. It's a place where all of the law enforcement agencies and all of the private sector agencies that work with law enforcement, they all push their data into this center, and then it's hit with AI to determine whether or not there's going to be a crime in a certain place. The thing that's important about these data centers is to know is there's like 50 of them throughout the country, and they were set up for 9/11. I dug a little into CPIC, and you can find that information at the end of this video. Let's go on with this press conference, though.
Come across a post on social media that a caravan of cars being prompted to go to our downtown to loot. Within 15 minutes, we respond, and almost immediately the caravan is in our downtown area. So this is a 15, 30-minute window of intelligence information about potential looting with caravans of cars going downtown, and our response to sending 400-plus officers. And I just want to emphasize, we made 100 arrests of looters for disorderly conduct, battery to officers, and theft, along with several officers being injured, several officers being shot at. So when you talk about being overwhelmed, I'm not sure I can digest when officers are doing their job, making an arrest and being under the threat of being shot at. I would do nothing but applaud the efforts of the Chicago police officers in response to a social media post and almost immediately caravans of cars going to our downtown area. So again, I made this point in my comments. These looters act as if there are no consequences to their behavior. And they based it on what happened previously, that we made a lot of arrests during May and June. And not many of those cases were prosecuted to the fullest extent. And I think that's my point and the mayor's point. We have to have consequences for the arrests that Chicago police officers make through great threat to their own safety. They're being shot at to make these arrests. And these looters, these thieves, these criminals are emboldened by no consequences in the criminal system. They get released. Many charges get dropped. And so they feel emboldened to do it more.
This is a direct result of Mayor Lightfoot and other Democrat politicians getting out there and saying that the riots at the end of May were peaceful protests. He refers back to these riots as learning experiences to deal with the rioting and the looting now, but he refuses to acknowledge that back in the end of May, those were riots. Why are they emboldened to do it again? Because the DAs of these large cities let them off the first time. What do you think is going to happen? And now it seems as though these very same people are wanting to change their mind. I don't think you get to change your mind at this point. So we have an event, then we have riots because of the event. The media says that those were not riots. They were just peaceful protests. And so they happen again, and when they happen again, it results in a clampdown from the state. And in my opinion, every person down the line needs to be looked at, from the people involved in the event to the DAs that let the people go to the mayors that refused help. These people are all subversive agents, and they were all aiming for the same goal. And this is not a surprise because BLM has declared themselves a Marxist institution. Some of these DAs were put in there by George Soros, Larry Krasner. And so with all the gaming going on both sides and the obvious problem, reaction, solution, are we to just believe that these lockdown measures are strictly for the public's safety? I did an episode a long time ago about what I called health tracking and restriction apps. They were using it in China and Russia, and it was spreading. They already had it in Singapore. They use a version of it here, and the infrastructure for the apps has already been put on Google and Apple phones. But there has been an uptick in apps that are getting the people to tell on each other, and this is a common thread that I'm seeing. The CV and then the riots were like a 1-2 hit, like 9/11 and then the anthrax, and they're using it to tighten the noose.
That is not a consequence of the officers not making the arrest. The officers are making the arrest. The consequences are once prosecution and sentencing comes up, there's no consequence. So we would argue that let's have the criminal justice system here deliver a strong message to these criminals that there will be consequences for your behavior.
And this is the interaction that I wanted to point to in this video, so hold on to your butts.
It almost sounds as though you're saying this is the reason we have it is because the courts and the prosecutors were not doing their job, that they were going too easy on the looters from the last time around.
Don't take it from me, just go by what's been done.
I'm just asking.
I don't want to do your job for you, but just go by what's been done. There were no consequences for the people arrested.
Craig, let's be clear. I mean, don't bait us, okay?
No, I was asked to ask this.
Do not bait us. Do not bait us. This is a serious situation. People are concerned about their safety. Officers are concerned about their safety. So don't bait us. What we're saying is, as a result of what happened last night, there have to be consequences. We've got teams of people that are.
Why is Lightfoot so hot? Because the reporter was finally drilling down on the fact that this is a result of the riots that happened at the end of May not being prosecuted, period.
That are aggressively out there, identifying the people responsible, looking at the plates, and we're going to bring them to justice. But when we do, and we do make those arrests, our expectation is that this is going to be treated with the level of seriousness that it should be, period. Don't try to bait us, mischaracterize, pit one against the other. We're not playing that. We are in a serious situation here, and we need a serious response. That's what we're saying, period.
I'm not trying to bait you, Mayor. I'm just asking.
Whenever they get mad, they can't help but to accuse you of what they're doing. The reporter isn't trying to pit one person against the other. He's pointing out the politics that pitted people against each other at the end of May.
A question that seems
ask and answer. You have another question?
Yes, I do. You talked a little bit about it, but several questions have come in. How do you convince people and businesses downtown that it's safe to be here?
So we explained that we're committing our off days of our officers are canceled. Our officers are committing to working 12-hour shifts to not only protect the downtown, which is important, but just as important are our neighborhoods, so we can have enough resources to obviously anticipate what happened before. Once we take care of downtown, then the looters before, back in May and June, went to the neighborhood retail areas to commit looting. So we're anticipating all that and committing enough resources to our downtown and to our neighborhood areas to protect both.
And it's amazing how angry that made the mayor, that question, because she just walks off the stage. Listen to this. The reporter is trying to figure out what just happened as the scene's closing.
What's this other availability? Is there another availability somewhere? I got to figure out what they're talking.
Something tells me that the availability they're talking about doesn't involve that guy. But I told you we would go through Lightfoot's speech, so let's go back through Lightfoot's speech in the context of having heard her wig out at him talking about the end of May, beginning of June timeframe.
We are waking up in shock this morning. Early morning hours of today, dozens of individuals came to our loop Mag Mile, River North, and Gold Coast neighborhoods, as well as our commercial district around North and Clybourne. These individuals engaged in what can only be described as brazen and extensive criminal looting and destruction. And to be clear, this had nothing to do with legitimate, protected First Amendment expression. As the superintendent said, we are currently investigating reports that this activity was connected to a shooting and resulting activity that took place in Inglewood yesterday. But regardless, First Amendment protected speech, these were not poor people engaged in petty theft to feed themselves and their families. This was straight up felony criminal conduct.
This is why I skipped her to begin with. I cannot stand this woman. But regardless, she keeps pounding home the difference. There's a difference between the end of May and now. There's a difference. I am getting so annoyed with it. All right, so I'm going to put this on speed forward, and let's just look. These are not the riots from 2 days ago. This is from the end of May, May 29th, 2020.
And I will code what I really want to say to Donald Trump. It's 2 words. It begins with F and it ends with U.
Whoops, that's not it. Hold on a second. Okay, here are the clips. So again, these are the peaceful protests back in May. These aren't the destruction and carnage that was caused over the past couple of days. So knowing that it was utter destruction back in May, let's get back to her press conference.
We've activated a neighborhood protection plan, as the superintendent alluded to, which involves city agencies like Streets and Sand, CDOT, Aviation, working coordination with the Chicago Police Department. These resources are being deployed throughout our city to protect our neighborhoods. And likewise, these measures will be in place for the foreseeing days until we know that our neighborhoods are safe.
You got that, Chi-Town? You guys are locked down indefinitely until she determines you guys are safe.
What happened in our city last night and this morning, of course, is deeply painful for every Chicagoan. As the superintendent said, this was an assault on our city. It undermines public safety and breeds a sense of insecurity among our residents. It also undermines our recovery efforts. These same stores that were hit last night were hit previously, not just by the looting, but by closures related to COVID-19. Stores that were targeted were more than just large chain stores. They were all small businesses and restaurants, representing our city's jobs and livelihoods, all of which were in the process of recovering or on the verge of recovering and getting back to work. And now this. I want to give my sincere thanks to the men and women of our police department for their professionalism throughout these very difficult times, not just last night. To our residents, I want you to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to secure your homes and stores and to allow you to return to your daily activities safely and securely. And to our businesses, we will continue our efforts working with you and redoubling our efforts to support you in your efforts to reopen and recover. And to those who engage in this criminal behavior, let's be clear. We are coming for you. We are already at work in finding you, and we intend to hold you accountable for your actions. I don't care. I do not care whatever justification was given for this. There is no justification for criminal behavior ever. You have no right.
Except I just showed you evidence of criminal behavior that they gave excuses for at the end of May.
No right to take and destroy the property of others. Our residents deserve to be safe. Our businesses deserve to understand and enjoy safety and security of their property and in their employees. And our police officers deserve to be able to do their job without having to worry about shots being fired, projectiles being thrown, and being maced. This is not anywhere near acceptable.
And I hate to step in again, but I must protest. I think this was exactly what was going on last month.
Police video captured a violent attack on officers who were protecting the statue of Christopher Columbus during a protest Friday night in Grant Park. The mayor decried the violence, calling those responsible vigilantes. The police video showed one person dumping out a backpack with what appeared to be frozen water bottles, which were then thrown at officers. Demonstrators also hurled fireworks, one sergeant suffering a broken eye socket from the shrapnel. Police said the PVC pipe used to hold the Black Lives Matter banners had been sharpened and were taken out and used to jab at officers.
It's crystal clear that what's going on in Chicago is Marxist-Leninists groups are intent on overthrowing the government and are being allowed to do such by Marxist-Leninist local government that has been financed at a local level by the likes of George Soros. But let's be fair, let's hear the rest of this out.
I call upon our state's attorney and our courts to make sure that these individuals who are arrested and those to come are held accountable. Put your best people on this. We have made the case. We have the video. We have the officer testimony. These people need to be held accountable and not cycled through the system. And judges that are holding these cases, you need to step up and be responsible. We can't continue to allow this to happen. And as the superintendent said, for people to believe that there is no accountability through our criminal justice system. No one wants to hold people in jail because they are poor. But people who engage in this kind of criminal activity, they need to be held accountable. And we can't do it alone. We need the prosecution and we need the courts to step up and do their part as well. And that is certainly my hope and my expectation. The gains that we have been able to make as a city through all these challenges, the pandemic, the righteous uprising in the wake of the murder of George Floyd.
And there you have it. The righteous uprising. That's the difference between May and now. That was a righteous uprising.
The other things that we have done to demonstrate that Chicago is back and resilient. We've been able to do this because we stood together, shoulder to shoulder, neighborhood to neighborhood, neighbor to neighbor. And we can't abandon that which has served us well over this most difficult time. But part of that means that we have to also step up in a time of challenge like this one and give no shelter to the criminals. You've heard me say this before. The people who are the shooters, as well as the people who are the looters. People in neighborhoods know who these folks are. This is your time to step up and demonstrate your allegiance and your loyalty to this city and report these people who are engaged in criminal activity.
And once again, the cries for everybody to snitch on each other. This is becoming a thing, and I guess this is going to end up a long video because we're going to cover that too. But who do you think she's saying people should be showing their allegiance to?
And you pick the people that run those agencies and the deputies that are pledging allegiance to the New World Order and good governance.
Okay, the New World Order and good governance. Now, this has been fact-checked. And the way they fact check it is by showing the video in context. So I'll put the video in context at the end of this video, and you can judge for yourself if it's taken out of context. The claim that they fact checked is she swore allegiance to the New World Order. Well, that's not what she did, is it? They always fact check something that we don't want them to fact check.
Cannot do this without you, and we need every single person with knowledge or information to step up. You can do that anonymously by calling the tip line, but we need people to step up. We are not going to let our city be taken over by criminals and vigilantes, no matter who they are, what they're doing. This is a time for us all to step up, and we will do just that.
And that's enough for her. So CPIC was mentioned earlier, and I said I was going to go over it at the end of the video. But before I go over CPIC, I wanted to show you a civilian version of the same thing. And this is how these citizens are going to be snitching on each other in the future. So you'll have the health tracking and restriction apps, you'll have the 5G, you'll have the tracking on your phones, the Internet of Things, and on top of it, citizens will be encouraged to report their fellow citizens for things that have been enacted for social shaming. Things like not wearing masks or violating curfew. And in any communist revolution, telling on each other is a key component, make no mistake about it. And with these apps here, what they've done is they've taken that and they've weaponized it, man. First, let this lady describe to you her app and what it does. And then when I go over CPIC with you, what you'll realize is these apps are civilian apps that are taking advantage of this government technology.
Woman assaulted, 322 Hillcrest Street just now.
Where evil lurks, Gary Goldenstein knows exactly where to find it.
Man carrying sword, Nordstrand Avenue and Jefferson Avenue. That's only a mile away.
He's no superhero, but he is using an app any caped crusader would covet.
What chance do crime and corruption have when technology unites the forces of good?
It's called Citizen, and it alerts users to crimes and emergencies as they're unfolding, explains Leah Arts, the head of the company's newsroom.
So Citizen employs a team of highly trained dispatchers who are monitoring emergency and 911 communications around the clock.
It's just one of several new apps.
You can now be fully aware of your surroundings.
With names like Spot Crime, Citizen Cop, and Red Zone that track and map crime.
Anywhere from shooting to sexual assaults to regular assaults to car thefts. And everything we have on there is verified. So we have a police report.
Ted Farnsworth came up with the concept behind the Red Zone app after dodging mortars in Israel.
And then I started thinking about why doesn't anybody give you a safe route and a risky route to map you, to show you where the crime is.
But while the goal of most of these apps is situational awareness so you can avoid danger,
from the police standpoint, I think this seems like another obstacle.
the fear is some will actually be more attracted to it, says Joe Giacalone, a retired NYPD sergeant.
Well, when we're talking about violent crimes, too, I mean, you're walking in on a robbery, guns, knives, whatever it may be. The general public isn't prepared for this.
I get downstairs, there's a bunch of kids going wild. The police are putting them in cuffs. The newsstand guy on the corner is bleeding.
Goldenstein says he will use the app to rubberneck, but he plans to choose the crimes wisely.
You don't want to put yourself in a bad situation. You know, curiosity killed the cat.
We hear the concerns about people getting involved or putting themselves in harm's way. That is not what we're encouraging, and if we see it, we will forbid you from using the app.
Many of the apps also allow users to upload video of an unfolding crime scene. And since Citizen started 6 months ago, the company says it's got 120,000 users. So far, none of them has been harmed.
Yep, well, all that human behavior checks out as perfectly normal to me. And these aren't the only apps for this stuff. There are tons of them. I mean, just a cursory review shows us Neighbors by Ring and Nextdoor, Local Neighborhood. So now that you've seen the civilian version, let's go over CPIC, the thing that the police commissioner mentioned in his talk. What have they done about data? How have they weaponized it against the people? And how are they rolling it out? At govtech.com, the Chicago Fusion Center gives police new criminal investigation tools. Chicago's new Crime Prevention Information Center, or CPIC, equips the city to prevent terrorist attacks and revolutionize investigations. In a windowless room with walls dotted by TV screens and large computer monitors, a detective replays the sound of gunshots. It has been automatically detected and recorded miles away by a new gunfire detection system, one of many features available on Chicago's new Crime Prevention Information Center. The gunshot detection system recognizes and tapes the sound of gunfire in the city's hot crime zones and immediately alerts the center's staff, providing a street address through triangulation so police officers can investigate. So CPIC is an extension of the Deployment Operations Center, or the DOC. CPIC is one of more than 40 fusion centers that state and local law enforcement launched in response to 9/11. As noted in a recent Congressional Research Service report, although elements of the information and intelligence fusion function was conducted prior to 9/11, by better integration of the various streams of information and intelligence, including that data flowing from the federal government, state, local, and tribal governments, as well as the private sector, a more accurate picture of risks to people, economic infrastructure, and communities can be developed and translated into protective action. That's a mouthful. Basically what that says is, if they can consolidate all the data information from all the government entities, large to small, and all the industrial entities, large to small, then they can form a better picture of what's going on in the world. Oh, and I feel like this is a great time to tell you that this was all before they had the apps like Citizen and Neighborly and all the other things that they've used to gather this data. The ultimate goal of a fusion center is to prevent terrorist attacks pre-crime, right? The ultimate goal of a fusion center is to prevent terrorist attacks and to respond to natural disasters instantaneously should they occur. But as the CRS report noted, there is no one model for how a center should be organized. Although many of the centers initially had the singular goal of combating terrorism, most have moved toward broader all crimes and all hazards approaches. Data fusion involves the exchange of information from different sources, including law enforcement, public safety, and the private sector, and, with analysis, can result in meaningful and actionable intelligence and information, according to the U.S. Department of Justice Guidelines paper. The fusion process turns this information and intelligence into actionable knowledge. Fusion also allows for relentless re-evaluation of existing data in context with new data in order to provide constant updates. The public safety and private sector components are integral in the fusion process because they provide fusion centers with crime-related information, including risk and threat assessments and subject matter experts who can aid in threat identification. According to Zobisky, focusing on crime and terrorism, as CPIC does, strengthens the anti-terrorism mission. Everyday crimes often are precursors to a terrorist attack. More importantly, having a center that responds 24/7 to real-life public safety incidents makes the center more prepared if a terrorist threat arises. So now that the threat of 9/11 has kind of faded into the background, these institutions that were established to combat terrorism have now kind of stepped back 2 steps and are now working on regular crime, on everyday American citizens, using data collection techniques that we authorize to fight terrorism. This combined focus is evident when you walk into the CPIC room. In addition to wall-mounted computer screens, there are televisions tuned to 24/7 news channels from both the United States and other countries, such as Israel, China, and the Arab states. Approximately 30 full-time staff members, detectives, police officers, and supervisors work at CPIC. As events warrant, each of the 35 suburban departments that work with the center lends officers to help field calls for information. In addition, representatives from the Cook County, Illinois Sheriff's Chief and other federal agencies also provide liaison personnel to the center as needed. While it continues to evolve, CPIC, built for $1 million, funded through a combination of sources, including the U.S. Department of Homeland Security grant, Chicago Police's operational budget, as well as seized drug money, has become a model for other jurisdictions, prompting the DHS to have Zobisky give presentations on CPIC to other law enforcement entities around the country. Much of the information flowing through CPIC, such as access to local and national crime databases, is something a tech-savvy police officer can access without the Fusion Center. But previously, it would have taken multiple searches and a deliberate effort to search for each source. CPIC has automated the process for what databases are searched, and it adds some artificial intelligence to determine information that might be relevant. This is changing the way the Chicago police investigate crimes, Zobisky said. Prior to CPIC, officers would arrive at an incident scene with virtually no other information than what was given in the call. They would then return to the police station, often the next day, to gather other information on file that might be relevant. Now through CPIC, as soon as police officers are dispatched to a home or street intersection, they immediately have relevant information at their fingertips about the location, who called the police from there in the last few days, recent arrests in the area, other reported incidences, and even traffic tickets given recently to On the Block. Officers are more knowledgeable than were before, which makes a big difference with how they approach an investigation and what questions they ask. They aren't faced with the situation of the next day saying to themselves, if only I had known this. CPIC adapts existing applications and technologies to the specific needs of policing and homeland security. A good example of this is the extensive use of GIS maps with multiple layers of information. Once crime and security information is amalgamated, far greater insight is possible for CPIC personnel. The system can predict exactly where the next gang shooting is most likely to occur, for example. CPIC's focus right now, other than terrorism, is violent crime. Zobisky said that since CPIC was launched in April of 2007, Chicago's homicide rate dropped to its lowest level in 42 years. He views CPIC as one contributing factor in no small part because it's changing how police officers respond to and investigate crimes. I'm sure it is. Nothing brings home the fact that CPIC is changing how Chicago's police operate as much as the center's real-time video monitoring capability. Most cameras installed in the city's crime hotspots can be panned and zoomed from any PC in the room, meaning CPIC staff can zero in on suspicious activity in the vicinity. In one instance, a detective watched a CPIC video feed as a group of suspected gang members loitered at a street corner. The video view is about the same as a beat cop would have from across the street, clear enough to detect suspicious activity. That kind of power has helped sell CPIC's innovations to the entire Chicago police force. All it takes is officers responding to an incident, getting directions via their radios for where to look for evidence. They will be looking around in the sky wondering who's watching from where. He's making a reference to this fusion center, this fusion data center that goes for crime before it happens, and he's referencing it to, he's calling it God. They will be looking around in the sky wondering who's watching us from where. So far, about 600 video cameras have been deployed. The majority of them can pan and zoom. As of present time, 200 more have been ordered, and Zobisky thinks the number will increase. I don't see a time when the number is likely to be reduced, he said. Interestingly, citizens in Chicago haven't expressed any major concern about the cameras going up in public spaces. If anything, on the whole, they seem to be pleased that this new tool helps keep city streets safer, a reaction in many places where public safety cameras have been deployed. Questions about privacy aren't unwarranted, however, given the potential power of fusion centers, especially if centers incorporate financial data and other information that private companies collect about individuals. Though police monitor public spaces by their very presence, video does so differently. By combining different databases, the potential to amass a lot of specific detailed information on individuals increases dramatically. As the CRS report noted, arguments against fusion centers often center around the idea that such centers are essentially preemptive law enforcement, that intelligence gathered in the absence of a criminal predicate is unlawfully gathered intelligence. The argument is that the further law enforcement, public safety, and private sector representatives get away from a criminal predicate, the greater the chances that civil liberties may be violated. The American Civil Liberties Union has expressed concern that a network of fusion centers could become the de facto domestic intelligence agency, established without a public debate about the risks to privacy and civil liberties. The DHS has recognized the privacy concerns. The National Fusion Center Coordination Group has taken a proactive approach to the formulation of standards for the centers in areas of training, civil liberties and civil rights, privacy, and baseline qualifications for analysts. When developing CPIC, ensuring that privacy and civil liberties were not violated was an important part of the equation, according to Zobisky. This is one reason the entire CPIC system is incident-based. It takes an incident of some kind to launch a query or investigation. In other words, there must be justifiable cause to initiate the investigation. Police operated on this principle long before computers entered the picture, and it has simply been extended to the sphere of CPIC. Furthermore, the center's system logs keep track of who accessed what information and when, thereby creating a comprehensive audit trail. If an outside federal agency wanted to audit our investigations, for example, it would only take about half an hour to familiarize them with the system, Zobisky said. After that, they could look into any possible privacy violation. But what happens when all of the about queries that are done into your system are then classified as they were in Crossfire Hurricane? What happens then? We have actually seen that these systems are incapable of protecting privacy. So I will link this in the description. This is pre-crime. CPIC is pre-crime. And they're monitoring social media. Clearly, the man says, we saw through our CPIC center that social media posts went up. We responded to the address that were on the social media post within 15 minutes, and the car caravans were already there. He's talking about the intense coordination of the rioters. I'm trying to point out to you the coordination of the police. So that's it, guys. I just saw this press conference, and it was so hypocritical and so outlandish that I had to cover it. The idea that they're trying to make this huge big deal out of what happened recently, and yet saying that what happened in May wasn't a big deal. It's the kind of thing that could make somebody trying to keep up with the truth make their heads explode. It can be so mind-numbing. And then we tie that in with these citizen apps that they're coming out with that allow the apps to track us, and we combine that with the fusion centers that are going on in most of the states across the country. I'm just telling you guys, I'm seeing the noose tighten. I'm seeing problem, reaction, solution. I'm seeing people cheering for the police state. And whenever I see it, I always know there's some kind of social engineering going on. It's the same kind of social engineering that has people doing the riots, people yelling at people about masks. It's the same ideological subversion. It's communist, and I can't scream it from enough mountaintops. But anyways, guys, like, share, sub the channel. I'll talk to y'all later. Alright, guys, love y'all. Out. Oh, and I said I would include that Lori Lightfoot interview where she declares the New World Order in its entirety so that people can't say I took it out of context at the end of the video. So here it is. Later, guys.
I'm going to consult with some of the aldermen who have been supportive of the campaign about, I mean, I'm very clear on it, and I know some of them have a very different view, but I'm very clear that it's got to go. I want to do it in a way that, you know, doesn't do further harm, the quintessential throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but it's got to go. How do you do it? My thoughts are, because it's not written into law, it's just a very dominant culture. I think the only way you can do it is a couple ways. One, I'm thinking about an executive order from day one that says, you know, in more legalese than this is not a thing. We will no longer honor this, because the way that aldermanic prerogative works is there's got to be compliance with the executive branch, because otherwise it doesn't work. So you got to eliminate that compliance, and you make it a mandate, and then you do training, particularly in the city, I'll call them licensing departments, whether it's zoning, buildings, housing will be impacted by it, planning certainly. And you pick the people that run those agencies and the deputies that are pledging allegiance to the New World Order and good governance. And then I think you have the Inspector General do some spot audits to make sure that there is real compliance. And I think you also, obviously have to engage with the dialogue with the City Council. It's not that aldermen are no longer able to have notice and an opportunity to be heard. If aldermen are doing their job right, they should be the people who are closest to the vibe and the beat in their neighborhood and have a very important role to play on a number of different issues, but not a unilateral, unchecked right. That's gone as soon as I take office, because it prevents us from engaging in citywide initiatives. It prevents us from moving ahead on important issues like affordable housing, and it is fundamentally corrosive. And there's no way to monitor it in a way that you can bring transparency and accountability to it. Because if I've got to go and kiss the ring of the alderman for everything, for a license to have a block club party, or, you know, whatever it is, and we're cataloging all the things that are run through the aldermanic offices, that's fundamentally a problem. And it's the tens of thousands of touches that an alderman has on a regular basis with constituents who think that they have to give some additional thing to get access to basic city services. That is the corrosive effect. And then it's obviously worse when an alderman takes that power and then tries to monetize it for him or herself.